The judge's fingers drummed lightly against the bench. His smirk hadn't faded, but there was something else in his eyes now, something sharper, colder. "Elon Musk," he said, his voice slow, deliberate. "You really think you can walk in here and win again?" The room was packed. Reporters clutched their pens, ready to capture the moment the so-called tech genius was finally put in his place. The prosecution sat back, already certain of their victory. This wasn't a trial anymore. This was a spectacle. Musk, however, didn't react. He sat there, calm, unreadable. The judge leaned in slightly. "Last time, you embarrassed this court." He tapped his gavel against the wood. Once, twice. The sound echoed through the tense room. "But today," he continued, his smirk widening, "the law fights back." A low murmur rippled through the gallery. People exchanged knowing glances. This was it, the day Musk would finally lose. Or so they thought. Because in just a few minutes, everything they believed about this trial, about this case, would come crashing down. And none of them saw it coming. The judge flipped through the thick stack of documents, his lips twisting slightly as he skimmed the text. His smirk deepened. The room was silent. Even the faint hum of reporters whispering had faded, replaced by an almost suffocating anticipation. Everyone was waiting for the moment Musk cracked. He looked up, locking eyes with the man in the defendant's chair. "You must enjoy wasting my time, Mr. Musk." The prosecutor chuckled, shaking his head. He turned toward the jury with an easy grin. "You see, ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when a billionaire thinks rules don't apply to him." More whispers, a few soft laughs. And yet, Musk, he didn't move, didn't blink. The judge tapped his gavel once. "I assume you understand that this isn't some Twitter debate you can meme your way out of." Scattered chuckles. A few heads nodding in agreement. Still no reaction. The judge's smirk grew. "Nothing to say?" Then finally Musk spoke. His voice was calm, steady, almost amused. "That's interesting," he said, tilting his head slightly, "because that assumes you actually understand the law you're trying to enforce." Silence. The smirk on the judge's face flickered. The prosecutor's confidence wavered. No one expected what happened next. The lead prosecutor adjusted his tie, stepping forward with practiced confidence. His polished shoes echoed against the courtroom floor as he turned to face the jury, hands clasped together like a man about to deliver an undeniable truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and authoritative. "This case isn't about technicalities. It isn't about innovation. It's about accountability." He turned slightly, gesturing toward Musk without even looking at him. "We are here today because a man who calls himself a visionary believes he is untouchable, that the law bends for him, not the other way around." The judge nodded, a flicker of amusement still in his eyes. "I must admit, Mr. Musk, you've been quite the headache for us." The prosecutor chuckled, flipping through his file with a deliberate show of ease. "A headache, indeed, but not for much longer." He stepped toward the jury, speaking as if explaining something simple. "The evidence is overwhelming. Musk's company has disregarded regulations, sidestepped legal protocols, and acted with blatant disregard for rules that every other business must follow." He let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "This is not about business. This is not about success. This is about one thing, the law. And today, for once, Mr. Musk won't be able to tweet his way out of it." A few quiet chuckles spread through the room. The gallery was eating it up. Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled furiously. The prosecutor knew he had them right where he wanted. But Musk, he didn't even blink. The judge leaned back, crossing his arms. "I assume you have a defense, Mr. Musk? Or should we explain these laws to you first?" More laughter. The jury exchanged knowing glances. Everyone believed the outcome was already decided. The prosecutor turned back to the judge, still grinning. "Your Honor, I request that we proceed based on the overwhelming evidence presented." The judge nodded, picking up his gavel. "Mr. Musk, this is your last chance to speak before we move forward." Musk finally shifted, adjusting the cuff of his jacket. Then, with perfect calm, he looked up. "Overwhelming evidence?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "Funny. I haven't seen a single fact yet." The prosecutor's smile twitched. The judge's amusement faded just slightly. Musk leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together. He wasn't nervous. He was waiting, and the courtroom had no idea what was coming next. The judge exhaled slowly, tapping his fingers against the bench. His expression had shifted, less amused now, more determined. His eyes locked onto Musk with something colder than irritation. This wasn't just another case to him. This was personal. He leaned forward slightly. "You know, Mr. Musk, I still remember the last time you stood in my courtroom," he said, his voice carrying the weight of an old grudge. "You made quite the spectacle back then, twisting words, bending logic, making a mockery of this institution." The prosecutor smirked, watching Musk closely, waiting for some reaction. He got nothing. The judge tilted his head. "Last time you got lucky," he continued, his tone sharpening. "This time you won't." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Reporters exchanged glances, sensing something more than legal procedure at play. The judge picked up a thick folder, flipping through its pages with slow, deliberate movements. "Let's take a moment to look at your track record, shall we?" He paused, then glanced up. "Oh, that's right. We don't have time to list every instance of you playing fast and loose with regulations." The gallery chuckled. The prosecutor folded his arms, nodding along. "You act like rules don't apply to you," the judge continued, his voice growing sharper. "Like your wealth and your influence make you untouchable. But I can assure you, Mr. Musk, that is not the case." More laughter rippled through the crowd. The atmosphere in the room was shifting, turning against him. And yet, Musk didn't blink, didn't shift in his seat, didn't even frown. The judge's smirk deepened. He leaned back, tapping his gavel lightly against the bench. "Let's be clear about one thing," he said. "You are not here today because of some misunderstanding. You are here because you believe your success places you above the law." Silence. The words hung in the air. Then, for the first time, Musk moved. He exhaled slowly, lacing his fingers together, tilting his head just slightly. There was no anger, no frustration, just patience. As if he were waiting for the inevitable. The judge narrowed his eyes. "You have nothing to say to that?" Musk smirked. "Oh, I have plenty to say," he replied, his voice calm. "I'm just deciding whether to say it now, or let you keep digging this hole a little deeper." The smirk on the judge's face vanished. The prosecutor's confidence wavered. Musk leaned back again, his expression unreadable. He already knew how this was going to end. Musk exhaled slowly, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve before leaning forward. His posture was relaxed, his expression unreadable. The judge waited, expecting hesitation, but none came. "With all due respect, Your Honor," Musk said, his voice even almost casual. "I'm not above the law. I just read it better than you do." The courtroom fell silent. The smirk on the judge's face flickered. The prosecutor's confidence cracked, just slightly. The quiet tension in the room deepened. Musk reached for a document resting on the table, flipping through the pages with deliberate ease. He wasn't rushed. He wasn't nervous. He was in control. "Let's take a moment to actually read the law you claim I've broken," he continued, holding up the text for everyone to see. His fingers traced a specific section. "This is the regulation your case is built on. But there's a problem." He turned the page, revealing another clause. "Because this law contradicts itself." A murmur spread through the room. The judge's grip tightened around his gavel. The prosecutor sat up straighter, suddenly less comfortable in his chair. Musk let the silence stretch before speaking again. "Your Honor, you can't punish me for violating one rule when following it would force me to break another." The judge leaned forward. "That's a bold claim, Mr. Musk," he said, though his voice had lost some of its previous certainty. Musk nodded. "It is, but it's also the truth." He slid the open document toward the judge. The judge hesitated before picking it up, his eyes scanning the text. The room was so still, the sound of the paper shifting was the only noise. The prosecutor cleared his throat. This is just a misinterpretation," he said, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. Musk turned his gaze toward him, raising an eyebrow. "Is it?" The prosecutor opened his mouth to respond but hesitated. The words didn't come. Musk sat back in his chair, hands folded. He had said just enough. The weight of the moment hung in the air, pressing down on everyone. The judge lowered the document slowly, his expression unreadable. But Musk had already seen what he needed. The balance of power had just shifted. Musk let the silence stretch a little longer before he moved. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the table, his gaze steady. "The problem with this entire case," he began, his tone controlled, "is that it's built on laws that were written for a world that no longer exists." The prosecutor scoffed. "That's nonsense." Musk tilted his head slightly. "Is it?" He reached for another document from the pile in front of him. "Let's break it down." He held up the text, flipping through the pages. "The regulations you're using against me," he said, tapping the paper, "were drafted before modern artificial intelligence, before global space travel, before electric vehicles reshaped transportation." The judge's expression hardened. "Mr. Musk, stick to the case. This is not a philosophy debate." Musk smirked, turning a highlighted page toward him. "That's exactly what I'm doing, Your Honor. I'm proving that the foundation of this case is flawed." The prosecutor shot up from his seat. "Objection. He's trying to rewrite the law to fit his argument." The judge sighed, rubbing his temple. "Sustained. Mr. Musk, don't twist this into something bigger than it is." Musk exhaled through his nose, still calm. He reached for another document. "Well, Your Honor," he said, sliding it forward, "you might want to read this before making that assumption." The judge hesitated before taking it. He adjusted his glasses, eyes darting over the text. As he read, his jaw tightened. The room, which had been filled with quiet murmurs, went completely still. Musk watched him closely, his voice steady. "This case isn't about my company breaking the law. It's about the law being outdated and contradicting itself." The prosecutor's fingers curled into a fist. "That's a distraction." Musk turned toward him. "Is it?" Because according to legal precedent, he flipped to another section of the document. When existing regulations fail to account for a new technology, new standards must be established before legal action can be taken. The prosecutor shifted in his seat. His earlier confidence had faded. The judge's fingers drummed against the bench. He reread the clause, lips pressed together. He wasn't just listening now, he was rethinking everything. Musk leaned back, arms crossed. "So, Your Honor, are we enforcing justice here or just trying to punish innovation?" The courtroom had officially turned. The judge straightened in his seat, his fingers tightening around the gavel. His expression, once filled with amusement, had hardened into something else. Frustration. "Enough of this, Mr. Musk," he said sharply, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Let's cut to the chase." The prosecutor stood abruptly, grabbing a thick stack of papers. His hands moved quickly as he flipped through them, before slapping a document onto the table. "Your Honor," he announced, his voice louder than before, "we have new evidence." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Reporters leaned forward. Spectators whispered. The moment had shifted. This was the prosecution's last shot, and they wanted everyone to see it. The judge took the document, skimming over the text. His smirk returned. Well, he mused, tapping the page. "This changes things." All eyes turned to Musk. The prosecutor's grin was back, wider than ever. "Mr. Musk," he said smugly, "do you have anything to say about this?" Musk glanced at the papers, then leaned back in his chair. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Then he laughed. Not loud, not forced, just a quiet chuckle, like he had seen this coming all along. "That's interesting," he said, finally looking up, "because this document was written after this lawsuit was filed." The room froze. The prosecutor's smirk vanished. The judge's fingers curled slightly around the gavel. Musk tapped the table lightly. "Let me get this straight," he said, his tone as casual as ever. "This so-called evidence, which you claim proves my wrongdoing, didn't even exist when this case began?" The prosecutor opened his mouth, but no words came out. Musk nodded slowly, as if answering his own question. "So it's not evidence," he continued. "It's a last-minute attempt to patch the holes in a sinking argument." A hush spread through the gallery. The judge's jaw tensed, his grip on the gavel tightening. Musk stood up, buttoning his jacket with deliberate ease. His voice was calm, controlled, unshaken. "Desperation isn't a legal strategy, Your Honor," he said, stepping forward. "It's just desperation." The courtroom had never been quieter. The judge didn't speak. The prosecutor had nothing left to say. And Musk? He had already won. The judge leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. The weight of the moment settled on him. He scanned the faces in the room. Jury members, the prosecution, reporters scribbling furiously, all waiting for his next words. He let out a slow breath. "Mr. Musk," he said, his voice quieter than before, "I underestimated you." The prosecutor stiffened, gripping the edge of the table. His mouth opened as if to argue, but no sound came out. The once smug confidence had drained from his face. The judge straightened, tapping his gavel lightly. "After reviewing the arguments and examining the evidence, this court finds no grounds to proceed further." Silence. Then he delivered the final blow. "Mr. Musk, you are free to go." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scrambled, pens scratching against notepads, cameras clicking in rapid succession. A wave of murmurs swept through the gallery, some in shock, others in admiration. The prosecutor took a step forward, his face pale. "Your Honor, The judge cut him off with a single look. "The decision is final." Musk remained still for a moment, then calmly adjusted his jacket. No celebration, no outburst. Just the quiet certainty of a man who had seen this outcome long before anyone else. He turned, making his way toward the exit as the noise around him grew louder. Reporters rushed forward, microphones raised, voices overlapping. "Elon, how does it feel to win?" Musk slid on his sunglasses, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Feels like logic did its job." With that, he walked out, leaving the courtroom behind. But the impact of what had just happened would last far beyond that day. The moment Musk stepped out of the courtroom, a storm of reporters closed in. Cameras flashed, microphones stretched toward him, voices overlapping in a frenzy. "Elon, what does this victory mean for your company? Do you think this case will change corporate regulations?" "Mr. Musk, how does it feel to win?" Again, Musk paused for a brief moment, sliding on his sunglasses with an effortless motion. His smirk was barely noticeable, but it was there. "Feels like logic did its job." His words spread within minutes. Headlines exploded across every major outlet. Musk outmaneuvers the legal system again. Courtroom showdown ends in shock verdict. Elon Musk exposes flaws in government regulations. Legal analysts scrambled to break down the ruling. Some called it a wake-up call for lawmakers. Others saw it as proof that regulations hadn't kept up with modern innovation. One thing was certain, this case wasn't just about Musk. It had opened a door to a much bigger conversation. The very judge who had smirked at the beginning of the trial now spoke of Musk with a different tone. "He didn't just win," he admitted in an interview. "He forced us to rethink everything." Corporate lawyers, once confident in their ability to take on tech giants, suddenly found themselves questioning their own strategies. If someone like Musk could dismantle a case so effortlessly, how many other legal battles were built on weak foundations? Some called him a disruptor. Others called him dangerous. But Musk, he had already moved on. Another challenge. Another system disrupted. Just another Tuesday. This wasn't just about Elon Musk winning a courtroom battle. It was about something bigger, the flaws in a system that refuses to change. How many outdated laws still control industries that have evolved far beyond their original rules? How often do we accept regulations that no longer make sense, simply because they've been around for decades? Musk had the resources, the knowledge, and the platform to fight back. But what about the people who don't? How many businesses, innovators, and individuals have been held back, not because they were wrong, but because the system wasn't ready for them? This case may be over, but the real question remains: should laws adapt the way technology does? Or should tradition always come first? What do you think? Should innovation push the rules forward? Or should regulations dictate progress? Let us know your thoughts. The conversation is just getting started.